Good morning, church. Pastor Jennifer here with your Friday Daily Word. I'm glad that you're starting your day here. I'm thankful for your presence. We, this week, are wrapping up our daily word and our worship series called Still Here, looking at the ways that Christ is present in our present. And this past week, we heard great sermons on both campuses about the relational, communal nature of Christ's presence. And this is one of my go-to topics for ministry because as pastor of small groups, I get to put into practice this belief that we have from Scripture and from experience and from tradition that in so many ways we encounter the presence of Christ through others. One of the things that's great about the book of Hebrews that we've been dwelling in is that it is a very practical book. It takes these huge theological ideas and it ties them to the scriptural tradition of the Hebrew Bible that the New Testament Christians had to pull from, and connects that knowledge, that experience of God, and those theological concepts with the reality of Christ and the transformation of Christ's work in our world, the redemptive work of Christ. And it takes those huge concepts and then it gives the readers, including us, centuries, thousands of years later, practical advice about how to put that into practice. So it's theology and practice, or praxis, as you might say. And when we think about the practice of building community and relationship, sociologists have a lot to tell us about that. I have referenced the writer, the speaker, the sociologist, the researcher, the storyteller, Brené Brown before. Her work I find to be so relevant for living out the Christian faith. And one of her more recent books, called Braving the Wilderness, specifically talks about how all of us, part of the human makeup, has this need to belong, to be in community. It's part of how we were created to be. And in this book, Braving the Wilderness, it's a beautiful cover, by the way, she talks about how we are living in a time where we feel more lonely, perhaps, than ever before. And perhaps this resonates with you. Gosh, especially in COVID time. She wrote this book before that happened, but I think that we have all encountered our inner loneliness over the last 6 months. And on top of that, we are sitting in a somewhat contentious political season. We're sitting in a lot of fear and uncertainty. And all of those things work against us connecting with one another and against us living out that God-given impulse within each of us to reach out and to connect with one another. It's hugely important to our faith. In this book, she talks about spirituality as being the recognizing and celebrating that we're all inextricably connected to each other by a power greater than all of us, who we call God, Christ. And that our connection to that power and to one another is grounded in love and compassion. The next chapter of this book, from what I read, this chapter was High Lonesome, a Spiritual Crisis, naming that we have that loneliness and that it's perhaps worse than ever before. The next chapter in the book, following that quote, is called People Are Hard to Hate Close Up, Move In. And again, she's such a great researcher and storyteller. I'm not going to read the whole book this morning, but I wanted to give you that as a resource and to point to the fact that in the secular world, she's a practicing Christian, but she's writing from a place where these words would make sense to the entire human family. When we read in the book of Hebrews, in chapter 13, the opening verses, never cease to love your fellow Christians, do not neglect to show hospitality. By doing this, some have entertained angels unaware. And all of the instructions and recommendations that the writer of Hebrews then goes on to make. As Pastor Michael said in his sermon, the encouragement is for us to treat others, even if they are strangers to us, even if we perceive them to be different or enemies of ours, at opposition to us, that we're to treat them like family. And that is really a holy task that God calls us to. When God created the heavens and the earth, the cosmic presence of Christ, remember, God created all people. And as such, we are sisters and brothers, especially with fellow Christians, but also with all people. As humans, we need one another, and we need to listen to one another. And we need to move past our fear or hatred of one another, the ways that we broadly sort one another into categories based on politics or outward appearance or some other distinguishing trait of who we are, and see each other first as human family. And if we can see the image of God in one another and act accordingly, gosh, I think the world would be quite different. I believe that in the practice of our faith, we need to honor that need for one another that we have. And I also believe that in community, when we really share life with one another, we grow as Christians. Our faith deepens because we, in the practice of having deep and vulnerable conversation and sharing faith and struggling with faith and big questions and praying for one another, we uncover the fact that we are indeed different from one another, but through that, God is still faithful, and the image of God is present in each one of us. And so when we get to know each other in a real way, when we share faith and when we share life, and when we move past the preconceived notions that we have of one another, then we can truly connect. And then we can encounter Christ in someone that may surprise us, entertaining angels unaware, as the writer of Hebrews says. So that's one of the reasons that I believe participation in small groups is so important, because we can't deepen our understanding of who Christ is and who God is and our faith in all of that on our own. It's in the practice of relationship and struggling to love others who are different than us, in recognizing that God is faithful and present in others who are different from us, that we do in fact grow and grow closer to Christ because of that. So if that sounds appealing to you, if you'd like to know more, I encourage you to go to mdumc.org/living and find out more about home groups or triads or any of the other small groups that we have at our church. There's a place for you. There's a place for each one of us, and community is very important. As I wrap up this daily word, I want to let you know that the pastors are taking a little bit of a break from the daily word format. We will be back in Advent with a new engagement for you on weekdays. And so I hope that you use this short fallow season for your daily practice of faith and lean into a practice perhaps of a home group or triad or some other resource that we have at the ready for you. If you need some guidance there, just email us. But this will be the last daily word for about a month or so, but we'll be back and we're looking forward to it. I hope that you have a wonderful day, a wonderful weekend, and I hope that we catch you again soon online or in person. If you have prayer requests, please send those in to us. And if you have comments about this daily word, if you want to talk more about community and connecting, leave a comment below. We're thankful for you, we're praying for you, and we will see you soon. Blessings.